Harry, aren't you supposed to be out looking for...
Yeah, my daughter.
Right, your daughter. But instead you found a Nintendo Wii set up on a projector and you just had to give it a shot, huh?
I came here for a vacation.
Yeah, but what about your daughter?
Leave her out there.
Harry! Do you even know the people who own this house?
I'm just a tourist. I don't know what happened.
Whatever. I guess you really just wanted to play this Wii. I do think the black ones look cool, though.
Oh.
Looks like you're struggling to play SSX Blur there.
I'm alright, I guess.
I also struggled at the beginning of that game. It is an awesome game, though, with an even better soundtrack.
No.
Harry, why don't you play something that's more from your time? It looks like you've even found a soft-modded Nintendo Wii there. Yeah, look, there's the homebrew channel, and they've got an SD card. Didn't you know that you can play PlayStation 1 games on the Nintendo Wii?
I can't just...
Yes, you can. Look, they even got the emulator installed already. Click on that PS1 logo in the bottom right there.
What is this? What's going on here? This is not a dream.
No, it's not a dream. It's the Wii SX-RX emulator. Once you get it up and running, you can play loads of PS1 games on the Wii. However, one does have to learn how to set up the controls for each game, for example, using the Wiimote and the nunchuck. Do you know how to do that, Harry?
I'd like to find out myself.
Okay. I'll teach you how to set everything up from scratch, alright?
Thanks.
So we'll start with the easiest way to get Wii SX-RX, and that is by using the Homebrew browser, which is now called the Open Shop channel. You need an internet connection at the Wii to do this, and you also need to have this app installed. If you don't have it installed, then you can skip ahead a little bit because I'm going to show you how to do that. But if you do have it installed, then we'll go through this process real quick. So we're in the Homebrew browser, and we just need to go to Emulators and scroll down using the Wii Nunchuck till we see Wii SX-RX, and we'll know that this is the right one because the author is Nias and the latest release date is listed here, which is September of 2020. You'll see that compared to the other versions available, this is the most recent one, and you would just simply click install here. If you've got the Homebrew browser, I'm sure you're familiar with this. So I just want to point out also that there are other versions of this app, which kind of makes things confusing at times. Wii SX-R is here, and further down is Wii SX. So this is the original team that created Wii SX, but then I don't know what happened to them, but they're no longer working on it. And I mean, we still need to give them credit, right? This was a huge achievement. And then somebody else took the reins and made a fork called Wii SXR. Maybe it was another team, some of the same developers, I'm not sure. And finally, currently there's another person developing this fork. So I use the most recent version, and so far it's worked for me. These other two are available and they do function, but I'm just trying to focus on this one for now, and that's the one that we're going to work on together. So we're back in the Wii home screen, and you'll notice that things look a bit differently than they did before. And that's because I want to use this as sort of a starting point for installing the Wii SX-RX app and its channel forwarder. Even if you installed Wii SX-RX using the Homebrew browser, we're still going to need to go online to get a channel forwarder. So I think it's a good chance to explain what those are. For people who just got a soft modded Wii and maybe their Wii still looks like this. For me personally, I think my Wii looked like this for 9 months before I finally figured out how to use channel forwarders. So I want to quickly review that for people who are just getting fresh into this. So that being said, I need to assume that you've got a soft modded Wii with the Homebrew channel installed, and you've got an SD card that's formatted to FAT32. So if this is what your Wii home screen looks like, then maybe you don't know how to install channel forwarders yet. And if you don't know what a channel forwarder is, I'm going to show you that here in a moment. So if I want to get to any of my custom Homebrew apps, I need to go to the Homebrew channel, and I'll find them listed here. And you see here that I've also got Not64 installed, and I want to focus on this one for a moment. So if I wanted to play the Not64 emulator, then I need to open the Homebrew channel and search through this list and find it. No big deal, I did that for quite some time, but if you want a direct link to the Not64 emulator from the Wii home screen, then that is what a channel forwarder does. So I'll show you how that works now. If we go back out to the system menu, and we see in the system menu that I don't have the Not64 channel forwarder installed. Oh, no, wait a second. Yes, I do. So I've just installed it. And now you see that this is just a link that shows up on the Wii home screen, which takes me directly into the app. And, you know, there's some nice animation and some music that plays. So now I'm in the emulator directly from the home screen. It's just a faster way to get in. You definitely don't need this, but it's kind of nice to have. If I quit, it'll take me directly back to the main menu. So one thing that's important to note about channel forwarders, at least from what I've read online, is that this is the one place where there is some risk of actually breaking the Wii. So you need to kind of be careful, right? You need to make sure that you download channel forwarders from someone who's competent and a trusted source. Usually GBA Temp is a good place to find them, or find discussions on whether or not a channel forwarder is trustworthy and works properly. All I can tell you for now is that the ones I'm going to recommend have worked for me and I haven't had any trouble. You do need to check a couple of other things first before I really feel comfortable recommending these channel forwarders. So let's go into the Wii options, Wii settings, and I want you to check that you've got version 4.3 here. It could be 4.3E or U, that's fine. It just needs to be 4.3. Other versions, I simply can't say whether or not the channel forwarders work on them. Another thing that's important to check is that the iOS version that you're using is iOS 58. So we can find that out by going in the Homebrew channel. And once we're in the Homebrew channel, press the home key on the Wiimote, and you see up here it says iOS 58. I'm not sure if the version is important, but I'm pretty sure that iOS 58 needs to be there for you to use channel forwarders. Somebody in the comments can correct me if that's not right, but I just want to make sure that your parameters on your Wii matches what I'm using so that I can comfortably recommend channel forwarders to you. So hopefully those things look okay on your soft modded Wii. Let's go back out to the system menu. I mentioned that we're going to get the OpenShop channel app and a channel forwarder for it. That's not to be confused with the Wii Shop channel. You can go ahead and hide that somewhere. And of course, we're also going to get Wii SXRX and a channel forwarder for that. One last tool that we're going to need is a way to install the channel forwarders. And in fact, that app will also have its own channel forwarder. We're going to pick that up as well. So I thank you for your patience if some of this stuff is review for you, but for newcomers, I think the terminology can be quite confusing, and it's helpful to see what each thing does before we go and start moving files around on the computer. Because I'm going to be calling these things out by name, and if you don't know what a channel forwarder is, for example, and you see me moving a channel forwarder file from one place to another, it might not be clear what's going on. Now, before we get started, I want to make it clear that I am not promoting piracy. The caretakers of property will hear about it, and they... hello? Who's this?
Sybil Bennett. I'm a police officer from the next town over.
Oh, that near to me. How can I help you?
What's your name? How do you feel?
You called... I'm okay. What is this about?
Now listen to me. It's dangerous out there. Have you got a gun?
What? Hey, you're scaring me.
Sorry.
I just want to show Harry and anyone else who's interested how to find what they'll need to play PlayStation 1 games on the Nintendo Wii.
Where do you think you're going?
Online? Look, I'm not going to pirate anything, Officer Bennett, I swear.
Something bizarre's going on.
Oh? Heh. Is it suspicious that I was the one to bring that up?
I'm going to call in some reinforcements.
No, I'm serious. Everything I show can be accomplished through legal means, all right? All right?
Uh-huh.
I swear I will not promote piracy.
Glad to hear it.
Right, so I think we're ready. Let's turn off the Wii, take out the SD card, and I'll meet you over at the PC. Alright, so here we are at the computer. We've got our SD card plugged in, and I've also opened my downloads folder, which is where anything I download from the internet finds itself. You could ignore this everything else folder. Normally my downloads folder is a bit of a mess and I'm trying to make it clear, but I don't know where to put this stuff right now. So you'll see things come in the downloads folder and then we'll move them over to the SD card. And there's quite a bit to do here, and I'm gonna try to separate things so that it's clear. So just bear with me. Now the first thing we need to do is have something for decompressing files. So I recommend 7-zip, simple as that. Download the latest version if you don't have it already. Then you'll be able to extract many types of files. The only thing it doesn't handle is RAR files. I think actually it does. If you look in the FAQ, it does. It depends on the type of RAR file, but you could also use WinRAR. That's available elsewhere. That would be another option. So I'll assume you've downloaded 7-zip already. The next thing to download is WiiSX-RX itself. And we can find that using the link in the description on GitHub. So we'll scroll down to where it says Assets, and we want version 2.5 zip here. And to get the channel forwarder, we want the one that says Wii-V Wii. So click on that, and that's all we need from this page. So you see both of these zip files have showed up. I'll highlight both of them, right click, scroll down to 7-zip, and I like to extract to // which just puts these things in their own folder, you'll see. So now we've got another copy. I think this helps me keep things organized, especially if the folder has a lot of contents. So I can go ahead and delete these two zip files now. And I can open WiiSX-RX, and I see that there's an apps folder and a WiiSX-RX folder. Now over on the SD card, I've started with a totally blank SD card. If you've already got a soft-modded Wii, chances are this is not blank, but I just wanted to have a lot less clutter because I find some of these instructional videos a little bit confusing when there's countless folders to look through, so I've just kind of cleaned it up. So on the SD card, if you've got a modded Nintendo Wii, you should already have an apps folder. And if you don't have it already, we'll go ahead and create a WAD folder. So from the WiiSX-RX 2.5 folder in apps, we'll simply copy this folder into the apps folder on the SD card. Done. Come back out. We'll go out one level. We also want this WiiSX-RX folder itself to go onto the root of the SD card. So I've hit Control-Z and Control-V to copy this here. So this is how the root of the SD card should look. We need these three folders. The apps folder should already be there. A WAD folder is likely also already there. And if it's not, you need to make one. And now we've added the WiiSX-RX folder. I'll go up one level in my downloads folder again, and I'll open the channel forwarder folder. So it says here, made by Running Snakes. Credit to that person for creating these nice forwarders. And now you see there are two options, right? This one, VWii, is for the virtual Wii on the Nintendo Wii U. Don't use that one. We're using the one for the Nintendo Wii. Click on the one that simply says WAD. This time I'll right click, copy, and go into the WAD folder, right click, paste. All right, so that's the channel forwarder for WiiSX-RX and the app itself. We're done with these two folders. I'll go ahead and delete them, or you can store them somewhere else for future use. But for now, I'm gonna delete mine. So the next thing to look at is the WiiSX-RX folder itself. Inside there, you see there's a folder called BIOS, ISOs, Saves, and Save States. And we don't have to worry about saves and save states right now. but we do care about BIOS and ISOs. So we'll start with the BIOS folder. In here it says put scph1001 bin here. It's expecting a file, and it's a .bin file, which is a BIOS from a PlayStation console. Now this emulator is distributed with a high-level emulation capability, but it runs much better if you add a BIOS into this folder. But for legal reasons, the BIOS can't come with the emulator. So you would have to go find it yourself. Oh, and would you look at that? Something just showed up in my downloads folder. But wait a second, this isn't scph1001. This has a different name. Yes, that's because we're using a different BIOS. I'm going to recommend one that I have on my own through legal means, and it's called psxonpsp660.bin. Now, if you search for that through your own personal archives, I'm sure you'll be able to find it very easily. And it's a BIOS that had further developments by Sony for PlayStation emulation on the PSP. And I've been using it for a while as a replacement for the BIOS that you would normally put in here. And so far it's worked great. I haven't had any trouble with it. And I decided to use it because it's region free. I haven't actually had many problems with region issues, but whatever. This one's supposed to be the newest one, and I've also read that it's quite good. So that's what we're going to use. So I'll go ahead and copy this and put it in the BIOS folder, Control C, Control V, and it does need to have the correct name. So I'm simply going to rename this scph1001.bin. Now, if you get this name wrong, the emulator won't be able to recognize it, so make sure you spelled it correctly. We can go ahead and delete this reminder file here. Delete. And that's it. That's it for the BIOS. I'll go ahead and clear my downloads folder, but I think you should hold on to this one. Okay, so now we're done collecting the BIOS. Next, we're going to add some games. Now, the one that just appeared in my downloads folder is Twisted Metal 3. I'll go ahead and extract it. Under 7-zip, extract to Twisted Metal 3 /. Right, that took a minute. I can delete the 7-zip folder. So I'll open this file just to show you what things look like in here. You'll see that there's a long list of binary files and a .q file. Don't worry about that if this is the kind of file that you have. It will still play. Sometimes it's a single binary file, and we'll look at a couple of different structures here in a second. So I'll open the ISOs folder and simply copy this folder into it. Copying that over took a while. Now, just to show you what I'm talking about, here's another copy of the same game. And you see that it's a .image file with a .ccd and a .sub file. I don't know what those are. This is just another way that you might find the game in your own collection of games that you own legally. So for now, I'll get rid of these two. Oh, what's this? Grand Theft Auto 2. Nice, let's look. Okay, that's a .bin and a .q file. This is the most common way I think you might find these games. So I'll go ahead and copy that into ISOs on the SD card. And that will take a while. Right, so that's done. Oh, Silent Hill. Now what's this? Uh-oh. So what is a .bin.ecm file? Well, it's some type of compressed file. I don't care what it is. I just want to play the game. So how do I un-ECM it? Well, on this web page linked in the description, you see ECM and un-ECM 1.03. Go ahead and click Go to Download. Hit OK. Close this. Back in the Downloads folder, we have this 7-zip file. Extract to subdirectory. That's done. We'll delete the 7-zip file. So I'll go take this copy of Silent Hill. Cut. We'll go into the ECM folder here. Another level deeper. Paste. Okay, then simply click and hold on silenthill.bin.ecm and drag it over to un-ecm.exe. So there'll be a short process while it's decompressed, and now you have a normal .bin file. I'll go ahead and cut, go out to Downloads, Silent Hill, paste, And now that step is done. So you may never run into such a file, but I just wanted you to know how to deal with it in case you did. Now, if you are here because you want to play Silent Hill, then I can only recommend that you get the PAL version. Either NTSC version, that is the Japanese version, or the American version. I've tested them quite a bit and I'm not really able to get satisfactory results. But with the PAL region, I am able to get something that I consider to be playable on the Nintendo Wii using this emulator. But fans of this game will know that the PAL region had a censor applied, but you would probably also know that you can patch this censorship out. Now before we apply that patch, I'd also like to point out that this is the only version of the game that has support for multiple languages. So I'm pretty well convinced that this is the way to go. To apply the patch, which by the way is totally optional, we'll follow the link in the description and come to this page. And you can see in this video a quick description of what the patch does, but I played the American version when I was younger, so I'm looking for a similar experience now. And we'll scroll down to this link down here. Takes us to this MediaFire page. Go ahead and download. In the downloads folder now, we'll see this Silent Hill PS1 uncensored patch. Go ahead and unzip it. Delete the zip file. We'll go in this folder now, and there's a README file. The instructions are pretty simple, and I'm just going to show you now how to do it. Open this executable file. Don't worry, it's not going to melt my computer. Search for the ISO file. Click on this floppy disk icon. Right, and for us, that's in the downloads folder again. Go into this Silent Hill folder. Click the bin. OK. To find the patch file, go back in the downloads folder, or maybe just up one level. Go into this folder, select this PPF file, open, click apply. Now it says patch successfully applied, burn image to disk now. Just hit OK, and then hit quit. Yes, I really want to quit. And that's it. Go back out to downloads. And in the Silent Hill folder, you can see the current date. That's how you know that you did something, right? Otherwise it looks just the same as it did before. So I'll go back out to downloads folder. I can go ahead and delete this uncensored patch, or maybe store it somewhere. I guess I'll keep it. And now this folder is also ready to be copied over into the ISOs folder on our SD card. So I'll do that now. So that's enough ISOs for now. You'll notice that if you have a small SD card, that it fills up pretty quick. So, well, I'm basically already there. I would recommend putting PlayStation games on an external hard drive if you've got it. But for now, we'll proceed like this. Later in the video, I'm going to demonstrate some controller setups for the full Twisted Metal series. That's Twisted Metal 1, 2, 3, and 4. So when you're collecting your own backups, you can go ahead and add those as well. Delete Silent Hill out of my downloads folder, and this ECM tool you should probably keep, and maybe in the future, if you're kind, you could post it somewhere in case the link dies and so somebody else can get it. So that's it for preparing the Wii SXRX app. Let's go back out to the root of the SD card. But while we're at the computer, we're going to pick up a couple other things just in case you don't have it. You can skip ahead if you've already got this other stuff. And I'm talking about the Open Shop channel and its forwarder, and Wii Mod Lite and its channel forwarder. So we'll start with Wii Mod Lite, which by the way is what you need to install a channel forwarder. So I'll go to the link in the description here, or you can just search for Wii Mod Lite. I'll take this zip file here and the forwarder's zip file, download both of those. So we'll go ahead and highlight both, 7-zip, extract a subdirectory, delete the zip files, and under Wii Mod Lite, under Apps, copy this folder, Control-C, to Apps, Control-V. That's done. And under Forwarders, this folder is simply called WAD. Now watch yourself again here. Don't take the VWii one. We want the normal Wii one. Control-C. And the SD card, I'll go into the WAD folder again. Control V. Done. All right. So that's WeMod Lite. Clear the downloads folder again. So next we'll get the Homebrew browser, aka the OpenShop channel. So the first link takes you to this page, and to download the OpenShop channel, you click on this link, and it should just download automatically. Yep. And you can also download the Homebrew browser here. So we'll extract the Homebrew browser app, delete the zip file, go in this folder, and just take this folder called Homebrew browser. We'll copy that, go into apps, paste. And now we've got it. Now lastly, we're looking for a channel forwarder for the Homebrew browser. And from the link in the description, we go to the GitHub page of Gabubu. And it looks like this person has been quite active making different forwarder channels. The one we want is OpenShop channel, so we'll click that and download. Hit save, okay. So while we're here, it's a good idea for you to read this warning regarding installing a WAD. From what I've read, that is the highest risk thing that you can do for soft modding a Nintendo Wii. I haven't had any trouble yet because I've only ever installed WADs that I've seen at least somebody online say, yes, I've tested this, yes, it works, didn't brick my Wii. You know, there are ways to recover the Wii if you do make a mistake like this, but this isn't important enough to me to take risks over it. So I just find a WAD that somebody else has demonstrated works, and I use that one. And what's nice about what this person has done is they actually have a YouTube channel where you can see all the different WADs they've made and what it looks like. That's how I found this one. So back in the downloads folder, we've got this OpenShop channel WAD. Go ahead and copy that into the WAD folder. And now we're done. I know that's a lot of housekeeping, but I think it will be worth it. Now, just to review, what we're looking for here is under apps, we want to see the Homebrew browser, WeMod Lite, and WeSXRX. Under WADs, we're looking for the channel forwarders for those three apps. So there's the OpenShop channel WAD, WeSXRX WAD, and the WeMod Lite WAD. And lastly, in the WeSXRX folder, under BIOS, we should have this binary file, which is really the PSP binary that we have renamed to SCPH1001. Under ISOs, we've got whatever games that we want, and nothing is under saves, and under save states there won't be anything either. So we're ready to take this back to the Wii. We're now back at the Wii, and we've got the SD card inserted, and we're about to head into the Homebrew channel. But before we do this, I just want to mention a big continuity error that you're going to notice, because I'm recording certain things out of order and I just can't let it go. This is how the Wii looked the last time that we saw it, and soon it will look like this again. I don't mean to distract you with that stuff, but I just can't handle continuity errors without at least telling people what happened. So the next thing we're going to do is go into the Homebrew channel, and we're going to take a look at the apps that we've got sitting on our SD card, and then we'll install the channel forwarders. Now, normally you would expect to see a lot of different Homebrew apps here, but I've just cleared them out because I think it's too cluttered to have all these showing while I'm trying to do a tutorial. So here you see the apps that we have are the Homebrew browser, WeMod Lite, and WeSXRX. Just to tie up some loose ends before we look at the PSX emulator, I'll go ahead and get into WeMod Lite so that we can install those channel forwarders. So I'll press the D-pad down on the Wiimote to go to WAD Manager. Press A. Select source device, WeSD slot, that's fine, hit A. And now it says a list of WADs in that folder called WAD on the SD card. Those are the three that we've saved there. I'll go ahead and press plus on each one of them to install them. And I'll go ahead and hit A to proceed. 3 files marked for installation. Do you want to proceed? Yes, A. And it will just install them. I don't really know what's going on here. I just do it and I haven't had a problem yet, so I don't feel uncomfortable recommending it. Press any key to continue. And now I just press B multiple times until I get out to the main menu, press the home key, and then we're out. Right, so that's done. Now we'll go out quickly to the system menu. And here you see the channel forwarders have been installed, right? There's the WeMod Lite channel forwarder, and here's the one for WeSX-RX. That's very nice. And the Open Shop channel got put on the second page, so I don't really like that to be on the second page. I want it on the main page. So if I press A and B at the same time, you can drag it around. I'll go over to the main page and grab WeMod Lite, move it to the second page. Hold B and then press A. And now I've got that where I want it. This WeMod Lite, I just showed you where to get the channel forwarder in case you want it. It's more of a utility to me. I don't know that I need a channel forwarder for it, but now you have it in case you want it. Now, with these channel forwarders installed, instead of going into the Homebrew channel, then into the WeSX-RX app, I can just simply click here and get directly into WeSX-RX. Now, here's the emulator finally. But while I'm still doing a lot of testing, I actually want to get into the emulator from the Homebrew channel, because when I quit, it takes me all the way back out to the Wii menu if I access the emulator from the Wii main menu. So watch what happens. I hit quit. Okay. Right, so it's nice that that's working, but I'm still setting things up. So I'm going to go to the Homebrew channel, and I'll go ahead and do my testing and setting up from here. So go into WeSX-RX, load. Finally, here we are in the PlayStation emulator. So let's take a quick tour. Load ISO, you could load from SD, you could load from DVD, you can load from an SB, and I don't know what Samba is. So you'll see here that we've got the ISOs that we installed onto the SD card earlier, and we'll come back to that in just a second. Current ISO will also return to. We'll go into settings as well in a moment. Credits, I just want to take a quick look at this. Bless their hearts for creating this emulator for us. Okay. Quit and play a game. You need to load an ISO before you can play a game. Now I want to look at settings next. Here in the General tab, we see select CPU core, interpreter, or dynamic recompiler. Select the BIOS. The default is to use high-level emulation, but since we have installed the BIOS onto the SD card, we can go ahead and select SD card. If you have it named incorrectly, or if the emulator can't find the BIOS, then it will give you an error message here. Boot through BIOS, we can just leave that on no. It simply plays that PlayStation animation that we all know and love. I don't think it actually has an effect on whether or not the game will run. Save settings.config. So if I make any changes in this settings menu either on any of these tabs and I want them to be saved, I need to come back to this General tab and hit SD, save to SD. You could also be saving it to the USB, but we're using the SD card in this case. Now the video settings I'm going to show you in the context of a running game, because I think that makes it way easier to understand what each of these buttons does. And input we'll come to in just a moment. Audio, I leave these also at the default, but this is where you would disable some audio if you'd like to do that. And saves, I also leave these on the default, and they're also pretty self-explanatory. So go back to General, hit SD, again, just out of habit. So finally we come back to the controllers. We'll leave the PSX controller type at standard. Disable rumble, yes, I don't care for that. Save button configs to the SD card. And the auto load slot, I don't want it to be default. I'm going to change that to slot 1. So I'll click save to SD card and go back into General and save again. Now you notice that I do that quite often, but I think that's what it takes in order for the settings to stay the way you've set them. Back under input, let's go to configure buttons. The next pad takes you to the next controller, but I've only got the one hooked up. Load default would reload the default controller config, so I'll just change this one now so you can see it. Load default, and I put it back to how it was. Slot 1 is where we would save this if we do decide to save it. So you'll see that there are 4 slots available. We'll go ahead and leave it on slot 1, and then I'm going to make some changes to this general layout. So the default layout, to me, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So what I want is a controller scheme that I can use when I'm testing games and I'm trying to figure out if the game works or not. Once I know that the game works, then I can come up with a better control scheme, but for now I just need something that will help me get through the menus. So we'll start in the upper left corner. To me, these two buttons are flipped around. I think this should be C on the top. And I think this should be Z on the bottom. Just press it once. So if you've got a Wiimote and nunchuck, then to me these buttons are flipped. I think this should be minus and this should be plus. Now, these buttons are okay as they are, right? D-pad up is a triangle, D-pad right is a circle, and so you have a rough idea of what buttons you would be pressing in a menu. So I'll leave that as it is. But over here, I want to use the nunchuck to control the directions. So I would like this current button layout to be my default button layout when I'm working my way through menus while testing games. So I'll go ahead and hit save so that it saves the current button mapping to slot 1. Pull the B trigger to back out 1. Save button configs to SD card. Okay. Auto load slot is slot 1, so that means the settings that we've just set up for slot 1 is what will load by default, but I'm still not done. You need to go back to general and save settings to SD. Okay. I went back out to the main menu just to demonstrate that these settings have saved. So I'll quit. Okay. Go back in. We're back in. Go under settings, input, configure buttons, slot 1, and there it is. You see that this controller mapping has been saved. Now that that is set up, we're finally ready to start looking at games. So I'll head back out to the main page. We'll go to load ISO, load from SD, and we're going to start with Silent Hill. I think that game is pretty good for demonstrating what's going on in the video settings, and I'm also pretty sure that everybody's here for that game, so that's where we're going to start. Now I want to point out something. Under settings in video, you see the dithering has been set to none, but I didn't set that, right? It just got set that way automatically. You may want to know that just because when I go to load ISOs and this setting gets changed, it may or may not have an effect on whether or not the game starts. Sometimes in an attempt to get games to start, I've actually set dithering to always and then tried to start the game, and it doesn't work. You know, I think the emulator maybe knows best in this case. It seems that it always gets set to either default or none, regardless of what settings I've saved. Just so you know about it, it's not like your settings are getting cleared or anything. It just seems to do that automatically. So go back out to general. I'm sorry, we'll go back out to the main menu here. And should we play the game? Yeah. So I pressed plus on the Wiimote. I know it is total blasphemy to skip that. I'm really, really sorry. But, you know, we got to move on. Now you see the FPS counter in the upper left is sitting right at 50 frames per second. That's the standard for PAL region games, so there's nothing to worry about there. For NTSC games, the standard is 60. So now that we're in the main menu, I want to give you a feel for how the generic controller layout is going to help us navigate through various different games. Now, if you follow the link in the description below, you'll come to this page that says WiiSX RX emulator control settings on the Nintendo Wii. And there are two lists here. One of them is controller input mappings for the Wiimote and nunchuck. And let's start there. I'll click on generic for testing. What the ruddy hell is taking so long? And here you see the generic controller layout that we set up a moment ago. Now, I've put this online for your reference because I think trying to watch a video at the same time as setting things up on the Wii is a bit of a pain, and this should even work on your phone. So here you see the same web page on the phone, and you just scroll down and pick the first option here. And there you have it, right? So that should help you later when you're setting up the mapping. You don't need to have the video pulled up on your phone or something, just this web page. So like we talked about before, we see that D up represents triangle, D right represents circle, D down is X, and D left is square. A is R1, B is R2, minus represents select, plus represents start. And over here on the nunchuck, the joystick represents inputs on the D-pad, C represents L1, and Z represents L2. It might be disorienting at first, but you'll get used to it pretty quick, I think. So back over at the Wii, I simply use the joystick to move up and down through the menu. can go down to options and I'll press down on the D-pad, which is X. So we could of course make whatever adjustments we like. Now that we know our way around this generic controller configuration, it should be easy for us to make selections in the menu. Now the dialogue is only presented in English, but choosing a different language will help with the riddles, I'm sure, and also all the dialogue is captioned at the bottom of the screen in the target language. And now I'm going to start from the beginning. Even though I've got some saves here, I'm going to start in the beginning because I want to show you a few things first. So hit X, that's down on the D-pad. We're going to go with normal because this game is pretty tough. Although I selected easy there, didn't I? Now here's one thing to notice, right? His running animation, that's supposed to be in slow motion. If you do try to load the NTSC versions, then that motion, that running animation will be super fast, like comically fast, and the whole rest of the game plays that way. So that's why we're focusing on the PAL region. That's the biggest issue really, is that the NTSC versions, for some reason, they just play way too fast in the simulator. So the game looks like it's running, right? Now, if you remember, square is run, so that means I gotta press left on the D-pad and up to run around. And you can watch the FPS counter up there. It stays pretty consistently near 50 FPS. Now, when I start running closer to the buildings, right, things need to be drawn, and that creates a load. But for the most part, everything is running pretty nice. But in my opinion, this is, I hate looking at the game like this. This is not what I remember. So I'm going to go ahead and turn dithering on, but then you're going to see that we have to start making some changes to other options in order to get the frame rate to stay at a level that's playable. So if you can tolerate looking at the game like this, it seems pretty promising that the whole game would run like this, but I'm not going to leave it like that. So I'll press 1 and 2 on the Wiimote at the same time. That takes me back into the emulator. I'll go into settings. We'll go into video, and I'm going to turn dithering to always. I'll pull the B trigger to come back out and then go resume game. So now in my opinion, this looks way better. I know it's still not perfect, right? But this is more like what I remember. But if I run Harry in a circle here, you see that, oh man, only when there's hardly anything to draw does the game really keep up, or does the emulator keep up, I should say. So what can we do about this? If we go back into the settings under video, I'll go ahead and turn frame skip on. That means it's going to skip drawing some frames, right? Which is maybe not ideal. Now I'm going to introduce other problems, but I really want to have dithering on. So I'm going to go ahead and accept that sacrifice and turn the frame skip on. Press B to come back out, go to resume game. And now you see it, yeah, it looks a little bit choppy, but it's doing a better job of keeping up. And in fact, this is how I decided to just leave it. I'm okay with this. I really would rather have dithering on and no color banding with some frame skipping than the other way around. But that's just my personal preference. You can definitely set it up differently if you'd like. So I'll press 1 and 2 again and go into settings. And under video, if I take the FPS limit off, then the game does run a little bit faster. But it's getting to the point where it's like maybe too fast, right? This doesn't look so bad, but if you get in a fight or something later, it kind of feels like, it just doesn't feel natural to me. It feels like it's going too fast and it's not quite how the game is intended to be played. And there's other drawbacks, which I'll demonstrate later, to leaving the FPS limiter off. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that back on. Under video, limit FPS auto. I'll leave the frame skip on, and the other settings I'm okay with. I got in the habit of leaving the FPS counter on just because it gives me a good idea of what's going on with the game. But, you know, once you feel like you've got the settings set, then just go ahead and turn it off. And it looks a lot better this way. So let's move forward a bit.
Cheryl? Is that Cheryl? Where are you going? Hey, wait! Stop!
Alright, so that shows us a couple things, right? Now you have an idea of how the captions in the other languages function. We'll still have English dialogue, but you can at least read in whichever language you prefer. I'm going to move forward a bit, but I'm going to skip ahead here so that you don't have to watch me run all the way to the alley. So I put the FPS counter back on, and you might be able to hear that the music is getting a bit skippy. Right, so one option we have in such a case is to turn the FPS limiter off and hope it kind of smooths things out. Right, so the FPS looks like it's really high, but, you know, sounds better to me.
What is this? What's going on here?
Here's another thing to show. Look at this. This is the PAL region version. But here are the these creepy kids. Oh, they got me already. All right, that's way too fast. This is a very short cutscene, so I don't want to show that much of it yet. I want to point out that this, I'm calling it a cutscene, but I guess it's really an FMV, a full motion video. This is the one thing that doesn't seem to work in this emulator for this game. The full motion videos don't have sound, and if under settings you've got the FPS limiter off, then they play way too fast. I think this is just the state of affairs. You know, we have to accept that this is an emulator for a Nintendo Wii playing a PlayStation 1 game. I couldn't, in all of my testing, I could not figure out how to get this to work. So I left a link in the description so that you can go watch these FMVs, but you know, be careful. You will see spoilers if you get too far ahead. I don't know how to really tell you which one you should watch and when. Maybe just after you see one, then you'll know, oh, okay, I could go watch that with sound if I want. But I think there really is no dialogue in any of them. So, you know, maybe you're not missing much. Maybe it's not worth getting over to the computer to look at that. It's up to you. So I'll go back real quick.
Was I dreaming?
How do you feel?
Oh, like I've been run over by a truck. But I'm all right, I guess.
Glad to hear it. You from around here? Why don't you tell me what happened?
Wait a second, I'm just a tourist. I came here for a vacation. I just got here.
Now, during these sorts of dialogues, I also leave the FPS limiter off because I think it helps the conversation play more smoothly.
Have you seen a little girl?
Right, so that's enough playing around. Now what we need to do is develop a controller scheme for this because we don't really want to play using our default generic surfing through the menus to see if the game works controller setup. So I've still got this ISO loaded. I'll go into current ISO, and I guess, you know, you can see here, that's how I would restart the game if I wanted. Swap CD, I haven't been able to test that yet, but I think we know what it does. Load memory cards and save memory cards, I have not tested yet myself either. Show ISO info is a good place to find the number of the binary file that you have that you have pulled from your collection, because sometimes it's mislabeled. It's only happened to me once, but it may have an effect on the settings that you use if you're paying careful attention to that sort of thing. So I'll go ahead and hit OK. Now I've already got a point saved in this game that I'd like to show, so I'll slip over to slot 9, load state. It was successful. Back out one, go ahead and play game. Now, I don't know if you can see it, right? You notice maybe that the color banding is back. This just seems to happen when you reset the game. Sometimes this option gets switched back. So I'm going to press 1 and 2 at the same time. Go into settings, video, turn dithering back on. No big deal. Limit FPS I'll turn back on for now too. I'll go to resume game. Oh dear, it's a bit choppy. Now it seems okay. It's finally time to discuss the control scheme for this game. So you may ask, well, how did I come up with it? And the answer is simply that it was a lot of trial and error. I just got into various situations in the game, especially situations which require me to react quickly, and I had to find some kind of controller layout that felt comfortable and, well, one that was comfortable enough that I didn't really notice using it after a little bit. So I've settled on something good, I think, but I needed to figure out then how to show it to you. And because I expect it would be kind of a pain to always have to pull up this video each time you want to look up the controller scheme, I've set up a GitHub page which shows the controller mappings and also a table with the mapping from the old PlayStation buttons onto the Wiimote, and the actions are shown in between. So I'll pull that up now. So a link to this page is available in the description below, and you'll see that in the upper area there's the game controls using the Wiimote and Nunchuck, which I'll show you in just a moment. Down here is where you would start, but it's at the bottom because once you've got the information that you needed, then you don't really need to look at this anymore. So I'll show you the generic one for testing first, right? We discussed this earlier. So that's here for reference. And Silent Hill uses this layout. I also really want to make sure it was part of the video because you never know when links in YouTube videos are going to break, and at least the information is still contained within the video itself. Now, if I go back and click on Silent Hill, I'll go ahead and zoom in. I've made a table that shows the mapping from the old PlayStation controller buttons to the buttons that are used on the Wiimote based on the mapping that I've set up and that I just showed you in the previous picture. I'll scroll through this slowly again so that it's part of the video, so I appreciate your patience here. And if you need to look at this in the video, just press K to pause. Okay, that's enough. Now I think the last thing to point out about this controller mapping is that there are many parts to it. So we've got the button inputs on the Wiimote itself, right? What the user gives the Wiimote. Then that information goes into the emulator, and the emulator uses the controller mapping that we've set up to now give inputs to the game itself. The game itself also has a controller layout that needs to be selected. Now, of course, I'm going to select the default control layout, but I point this out to you because if you accidentally change that setting, then none of this stuff is going to work for you, right? Maybe some of it would work, but most of it won't, and it's going to be frustrating. So you should at least check that that setting has not been changed. And if you have, I think you can expect everything to work. And the place to check that in the game is in the inventory menu. If I scroll down to options, controller config, I've used type 1. That's what I wanted to point out to you. And once again, type 1 is the default, and in most cases, I would have picked the default controller configuration. And if there are exceptions, we'll discuss it later. Now you can also bring up the mapping for the individual games, but I'm only showing the first two columns here because at the end of the day, that's all you really need. If you're using the phone as a reference, then you just need to know which buttons on the Wiimote are actually working in the game as you play it. So I'm actually going to use this now while I explain what Harry does here. So if I want to run, I need to hold down A and press forward. And the action button is the trigger actually here on the underside. So to check doors, grab objects, that sort of thing. To turn the light on and off, I press up on the D-pad. Turning is obviously handled with the joystick. I don't know if you call these tank controls. I'm not going to commit to that because I know people are real particular about that. To view the items inventory, you press minus. And of course, moving around in the menu is mostly normal, except that since the action button is X, which is the trigger here, I find this the only thing that's a little bit counterintuitive, right? You press A to move backwards and not forwards. That's B to move forward, A to move backwards. And then you would simply press minus to leave, or you could press the trigger on exit here. To access the map, you press the home key. Oh, he doesn't have the map yet. Well, that's how you would access the map. And plus is simply pause. Now, if I want to fire the weapon, I hold Z and then pull the trigger, the action button. Okay, once again, that's Z and the action button. Another important thing to know is that you can center the camera behind Harry by pressing C. Now, I've chosen that location because it happens often in this game that you need to shoot at something, but you can't actually see what you're shooting at. So when you have the weapon raised and you're trying to shoot, if you want to see what you're shooting at, then just roll your finger up and press C, and the camera will swing around Harry while the weapon is drawn, which is quite nice. When you don't have the weapon drawn, holding the C button just changes the view a little bit like this. Another important move that he has is an evade move, which I didn't even know about when I was a kid. If you press down and A at the same time, he'll jump back. Do it. Yep. So I don't know how useful that is. I suppose it's quite nice to have. I'll have to give it a shot. Now the last thing to talk about is the 180-degree turn. Now R1 and L1 used to be sidestep to the right and left respectively, but I'm kind of running out of buttons here, you might see. Now I've decided to map sidestep to the right D-pad button, and sidestep to the left to the D-pad down button. Now of course you're freaking out and thinking, why not just map sidestep to the right to the D-pad right button and sidestep to the left to the D-pad left button? And I'll show you why. So I've just slipped away for a second to change the settings so that this is now sidestep to the right, this is sidestep to the left. Now when you're in a fight, it's hard to pull this off, right? I get panicky, so I'm pressing right, left in order to turn around. Like I did it successfully that time, but in the fight, it's hard to do it fast enough. I'm running around, there's a bird chasing me or something. I can't always get it to come out. So I'll put it back the way I had it. Now, in my opinion, the solution here is to be able to press the D-pad on its bias so that I register a press with both of these buttons, and that way he'll perform the 180. Like so, right? A nice hard press down into the corner, and he's actually able to do the movement. Also with the weapon drawn. Now, if you're left-handed, you might want to make the following adjustment. I'll change L1 to be mapped to D-pad left, and R1 gets mapped to D-pad down. Only have to press it once there. And the layout will give you this result. D-pad left is step to the left, D-pad down is step to the right, and to perform the 180, nice hard press in the corner, and you'll get it. So I can't keep the controller like this, obviously, so I'll switch it back. Now you may have noticed that I haven't mapped anything to the 1 and 2 buttons down here, and part of that is because I have enough buttons already to mostly cover this game. But the other reason is that when I press 1 and 2 to go into the menu, one of these buttons gets a press before the other one registers and actually takes me into the menu. So if I have an in-game action mapped to either of these buttons, and that one gets pressed first, then it'll happen in the game before it takes me out into the menu. And then when I go back into the menu, that action will get performed. So I used to have the map button mapped to 1. And what would happen is that every time I'd go back into the game, I'd be looking at the map, and that just got kind of annoying, right? So I decided to have nothing mapped to these buttons, but just for the sake of demonstration, if we go into settings, change the start button, which is currently pause, to 1. Now head back out. Now when I press 1 and 2 at the same time, but I sort of start by pressing 1 and then hit 2, it takes me out to the main menu, but when I resume game, the game is paused. I think this can be used to your advantage, right? If you're feeling short on buttons up here, and if you've got a button that only pauses the game, or maybe it dumps you into the inventory, then you might consider mapping it on 1, so that way when you slide your thumb over to 1 and 2 at the same time, the game automatically gets paused, and then when you jump back into the game, you've got a moment to get your bearings before you continue playing. So I bet you're thinking, is he going to play the game or what? Well, I'll go ahead and do it now. I'll head into the lobby here to get the map, which I forgot to grab on the way in. Trying to grab the map here, hit X, and you'll want to hit A to select this, but you should hit X. So it's laying on the ground, but you can hear through the radio that it's still alive. And in those situations, you can walk up to it and pull the trigger. It gives a little love tap. Okay. Yo! So we're in the classroom and it is time for another lesson. I'll go ahead and press the home key to bring up the map. And to zoom in, I pull the trigger. And you can of course use the joystick to scroll around. To zoom out again, pull the trigger again. And when you see the blue arrows on the top and bottom of the screen, that means you're in a multi-level area. So just press up and down on the joystick to change levels. Just like you would expect. To get out of the map, you can press the home key or A. It's finally time to talk about save states. So that's kind of an expected feature in most emulators. And here, to save states in this emulator, I'll go out into the main menu, and under current ISO, I need to choose a slot. I don't want to overwrite this one, so I'll just pick slot 0 for now. I'll go ahead and save state. I think a lot of people are familiar with how save states work, but just in case you're not, you need to pick a slot first, and then I save the state of the game onto that slot. If I click load state, it will then reload that state, and it's kind of a substitute for memory cards, but you can do this at any point in the game. However, the memory card function in this emulator does also work. So if I go back into resume game, now let's just say I'll do something very simple like step outside into the hallway. If I go back into current ISO and load state, you see that I'm back in the classroom, right? It's just a snapshot and I can always go back to it as long as I don't overwrite that state. It does also work if I quit the emulator. Head back in. But the procedure is slightly different since I've left the emulator. Now I need to go load the ISO. And then under current ISO, I can load state. If you try to load state without first loading an ISO, then it's going to tell you you have to load an ISO first. So I picked the slot I want, which is already set to 0. Load state, said it was successful. Now I can expect to drop into the game right where I was before. And here I am. Right, now that's something I wanted to show anyway. I need to go back and change my input settings. If I go to the input page, I see the auto load slot is 1, right? But I've got the buttons configured on slot 2 for Silent Hill. So I need to hit load. So now I've got Silent Hill loaded. And if I was playing Silent Hill only for a while, then I would probably want to set this to auto load slot 2, then save button configs to SD, then go to general and save to SD. So I can go resume game now. Turn the light back on. It may be difficult to see at the moment, but I know the video settings have also been cleared. If you look at the blackboard, you can see the color banding again. So I need to also go back out into video, turn dithering back on, frame skip back on. I'll leave the FPS limiter on as well. So I did have to change a couple of settings, but now I'm back in the game where I was and it's running how I wanted it. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, can I just save state every time I'm in a good spot and then reload it if I die? And the answer is, of course, yes. If I go to current ISO, just load the state again, hit OK, resume game, and now I'm back where I was. I'm pretty sure this is called save scumming, and you know, it's not the same experience as when you could only save to the memory card, but we're all adults here. I've only got so many hours in the day. I definitely save scum my way through the more difficult games. If you do it, you do it. If you don't, you don't. I think most adults would lose interest in this game if they had to always go back to the save that they had on the memory card each time they died. So with save states, you can more incrementally make progress. Anyway, I'm sure you can figure out how to save scum without me showing you how to do it. It comes naturally. Now, that's going to do it for Silent Hill, and it also covers everything that I think is important to know about the Wii SXRX emulator. I hope that I've answered any questions you've had before you even had them, because I definitely had a difficult time getting everything up and running. It took a lot of reading, but I think I've covered most of that stuff. So from here on out, we're only going to look at some other games. I'm going to talk about GTA 2 and the Twisted Metal series, but if you're only here to play Silent Hill and to get a handle on how to use the emulator, you should have everything you need to know. Everything that comes after this is non-essential information. You can come check it out later if you're interested in trying some of these other games. Now you are ready to go play Silent Hill on the Nintendo Wii, and I really hope you enjoyed this game. It's definitely one of my favorites, and I'm looking forward to playing through it myself. So all of my honors students, you stick around and we'll talk about some more games, but everybody else, you've got what you need, and class dismissed. Oh, there's no one even there. Before we look at the next game, just a quick tip. If I go into settings and input, configure buttons, and let's say I want to load slot 2, but I'm over here at slot 1, and I go to slot 2, and instead of hitting load, I hit save. Now that information is gone. I don't have that controller layout here anymore, and that could be pretty frustrating. But that is one advantage of it being kind of a pain to save things, right? We always have to hit save button configs to SD, and then in the general tab do it again. As long as we don't do that, then those settings won't get saved. So just quit, go back in, and now under settings we look at slot 2, load, and there it is. We haven't lost it, so that's nice. We'll go back out to the main menu, and the next game we're going to look at, load ISO, load from SD, is Grand Theft Auto 2. Now before I go to play game, let's go into settings and make sure that I'm using the generic layout. Okay, play game. Alright, so now we're in. Let's go to options real quick, and I just want to point out that under setup controls, I'm going to stick with controller layout A, right? I'm always going to use the default controls unless noted otherwise. So go ahead and hit back, that's up on the D-pad, press triangle. We'll go into play, press X, which is down on the D-pad. Under player name, that's where you could enter a lot of cheats. I used to do that all the time. In fact, that's pretty much the only way I used to play this game as a kid. I won't do it now because I'm not here to demonstrate that. Go ahead and scroll down to start on area 1. So we're in. Thing you might notice straight away is that although we're outdoors, we hear the radio. Thankfully, we have an option to deal with this, so I'll press 1 and 2 on the Wiimote, go into settings, audio, disable XA audio, yes. Go back out into the game, and now it's peaceful. So the controls are still a mess, and now that we've talked a lot about how to develop a control scheme, I'll just skip to the answer. So on the screen at the moment is the mapping for Grand Theft Auto 2. I'll go back, and here's the control scheme for Grand Theft Auto 2. I'll just scroll through it slowly so that you have a chance to look at it and so that it's always part of the video. All right. The guy's robbing me. Press 1 and 2 on the Wiimote, go into settings. I'm going to select my input that I've already set up for this, which is 3, load. Okay. Resume game. So once again, hopefully this still works, so you can pull this up on your phone. You can't rob me anymore. So to play the game, when you're on foot, you press A to run forward. Press down to run backwards. If I press the trigger, he jumps. Turning is with the nunchuck, of course. I found a gun, and I just have to press the D-pad to switch between it. That's Z on the trigger there. You press C to get in and out of vehicles. Once you're in a vehicle, the control scheme is quite similar. Press A to accelerate, down to reverse, and while you're driving, and if you want to make a sharp turn while driving, you pull the trigger. Now you can change the radio station only when you're in the car. If I press up, you hear this sound effect, right? That's the radio station changing, but we've turned the station off, so I'll turn it back on for a second by re-enabling the XA audio. And so you hear I'm changing the radio station now, yeah? Honking the horn, you press the home button. And then press C again to get out of the car. Right, now once again you notice that the radio is still on. I think that's just what we have to accept, right? This is running on an emulator. I'll turn it back off. So those are your options. Either the radio is always on or it's always off. If you have it always on, the only way to change the radio station is to get in a vehicle and change it there. But yeah, on foot, it will always be on. Maybe we can just pretend that he's playing the radio on his cell phone at full volume. I mean, he is a criminal, so it's not that much of a stretch to assume he's inconsiderate too. Now, for completeness sake, I need to mention that the settings I've got running here, well, the FPS counter could have been off. Limit FPS is on, frame skip is off, and dithering is set to none. If you turn it on, I think you'll see that there's like no difference anyway. So that'll do it for GTA 2. I know that I've said much less about this game than I have Silent Hill, for example, but this game for me was just a chaos simulator when I was a kid. I have no idea if it's got a story even. I just used to go, you know, terrorize the town pretty much. So that, I don't have much else to say, but now it's running. Now you've got a control scheme for it, and yeah, knock yourself out. Now before we switch over to the next game, I want to show you another trick here under Input, Configure Buttons. Now let's say I don't want Grand Theft Auto to be saved on slot 3. I want it to be saved on slot 2 because Grand Theft Auto 2, actually it's because I want it to be alphabetized so that it's listed in the same order as the list that I've got online. But you don't really need to have a good reason. You can just change it because you prefer to do it. You'll need to have an empty slot available for this. So if I want to move slot 3 onto slot 2 without losing the information that's available on slot 2, then I need to go to slot 3, load, pick an empty slot, save. So now slot 3's info is on slot 4. Go over to slot 2, load, pick slot 3, save to overwrite it, and then go to slot 4, load, scroll over to slot 2, save, and now these two have been swapped, right? Classic variable renaming problem in programming. So go back out, save button configs to SD, and yep, you guessed it, go to General and save config settings to SD. Done. Next we're going to talk about Twisted Metal 3. I'll go to Load ISO, Load from SD, Twisted Metal, and remember this one came in a bunch of different bin files. Just pick the first one. That's it. No big deal. Play. Reverse progress bar. Now I've probably decided to mute this part of the video because for whatever reason this game in particular has nasty audio artifacts that come through in the menu mostly, sometimes in the game. You may even decide to mute your TV while you're in the game menu here. At the very least you should turn your speakers down when you open Twisted Metal 3 if you open it to the main menu. Now just as before, I would use the generic controller scheme to get my bearings in the game, find out whether or not it works and so on, but we're way past that. So I'll show you the actual controller scheme that I've come up with. There it is, as before, just so that it's part of the video. I go back in the upper list, Twisted Metal 3. I'll quickly scroll through the controls here. So I've gone ahead and saved that to slot 4. Now I won't let you forget, once you've set this up, you hit save here, you go out 1 into the input menu, save to SD, and what do we do next? You know it, go to General, hit SD. Now if you've never seen this game, you're probably wondering like, what did this guy go through a teleporter while riding a Segway like in the movie Fly? Well, that's just really how Axel rolls. If you don't know the basic premise, the game is a vehicular combat deathmatch style game. This third entry in the series was quite unpopular upon release. I also hated it, but now that I play it again, I actually think it's fine. I don't really know what the big deal was. Now, it was the first game in the series to use licensed tracks. This was my introduction to Rob Zombie, and you'll notice that that is missing, and it's just going to stay that way. The tracks that come with this game don't play. The music doesn't work. It is what it is. This was actually the first game for which I developed a controller scheme, and I chose it because I thought it would be the most middle of the road in terms of the Twisted Metal series. And since it's a driving game, we've already got a really popular game to use as a template. And that game is Super Daisy Racing. Now here in Super Daisy Racing, we see that A is accelerate, B is brake and drift, you steer with the nunchuck, and you fire items with Z. And we use those controls in this game. It's really quite comfortable, I think. A is gas, B is tight turn, or just simply stop, if you ever do. You steer with the nunchuck and you fire weapons with Z. So that Nova there is Axel's special. That was it. Now most of the important buttons have an obvious place, but some of the other ones had to end up in a suboptimal place, but I think it still works. So if you want to use turbo, which is just drive really fast, I guess, you press plus, and you're still able to steer with the nunchuck. You also use that to put out fires in case you're set ablaze. Now it does happen often that you need to fire the machine guns and be able to drive, right? You can't just sit still and shoot the machine guns and then steer and shoot the machine guns. So you can still accelerate and move forward by pressing the... Oh boy, is he hurt. Now you can still accelerate and move forward using the joystick only, and that leaves your other hand free to fire the machine gun or again to use the turbo. Now if you want to change the camera, then you press the home button. And you can also do that in the menu. Pressing 1 brings up the menu. And here's another place you can adjust the camera and everything else. You can turn the sound up if you like. There's no music, so it doesn't matter. X is trigger. It happens often that you need to speed away from somebody and then do a 180 to turn around and start shooting at them. And so far, that's pretty easy, I think. Get off me, mate. Get off! Oh. There are situations where you need to look behind you while driving, and you can do that by pressing down on the D-pad while still holding A. Now give me 1 second. Now the last thing to point out is the one suboptimal part of this controller layout, in my opinion, is that you can only scroll forward through the weapons in one direction, and you're supposed to be able to do it also in the reverse direction. Now you can still do that, and I just had to settle with using left on the D-pad to get that accomplished, right? So if I press C, I scroll forward through the weapons like this, and if I skipped a weapon that I wanted, I would have to cycle all the way through again. But you can use left on the D-pad. It just means that you're going to lose control of any buttons. Oh god. It just means that you should maybe steer with the joystick while you're switching back through the weapons, right? You can still drive around while switching back through the weapons. It's suboptimal, but it works. And lastly, like I mentioned before, when you press 1 and 2 on the Wiimote at the same time, if you sort of lead with 1, then it pauses the game first, and that way when you jump back into the game is still paused. Now I think that pretty much summarizes the control setup for all of the Twisted Metal series. I have kept the same layout, the one shown in slot 4, and I use it for all 4 of these games, and there are only slight differences between the games. Twisted Metals 1 and 2 are almost the same, they just have a couple buttons missing actually. And Twisted Metal 4 is different, and you have to map things manually within the game, and I'll show you how to do that later. But once that has been set up, all 4 Twisted Metal games use the same controller layout on the Wiimote and Nunchuck. So that's enough. I think you get the idea, and I hope that showing you how to actually press the buttons on the controller was helpful. But yeah, now I'd like to get out from in front of the camera here before somebody recognizes me. Right, so we're going to look at Twisted Metal 2 here in a second. I wanted to mention that when I was testing Silent Hill and some of these other games, I didn't find any difference in speed or performance or likelihood of the game being able to run. based on the location from which I was loading the game. So when I go to load ISO here, I've got some of these games, I typically have them saved on the USB drive, and it doesn't seem to make a difference if the game is loaded from the USB drive or if it's loaded from the SD card, and also if it's a high capacity or low capacity SD card. It seems to make no difference. And I just mention it because, well, I think it might be worth entering it into the record somewhere, but also so that you don't waste as much time as I did going through and trying every combination you can think of because you really want to get a game to run. So here you see I've got Silent Hill also saved on the USB drive. It didn't make a single bit of difference in my perception. So I'll slip over to Twisted Metal 2 and load that. Another quick note is that you'll see there's some text here, right? This is just a reminder file that I created. If you catch a glimpse at the end of the file extension is .txt. So all I've done is within this folder where I have Twisted Metal 2 saved, I made a txt file, and in the title of that file, I put notes on which video settings I wanted, in case I come back months later and I don't remember which settings ran quite well in this game. Then I've just got it noted here. It's just an idea for you in case you want to make a note of the settings that you've settled on, especially if you don't play the game very often. You might also note which controller slot you're using for the game. That might be something you could include here as well. So I'll load Twisted Metal 2 just to conclude that discussion about the different ways in which I could run the game. I also tried a bunch of different BIOSes when I was trying to get Silent Hill to load. I had a BIOS from the PSP, I had early model PlayStations, late model PlayStations. I tried, I think, at least 8 different BIOSes. I also tried from different regions. And in my experience, when trying to get the NTSC version of Silent Hill to run, either the Japanese version or the American version, it did not matter which BIOS I used. It always ran way too fast. There were no settings I could choose that would really fix it. So I mentioned that here just to enter it into the record, and I also don't want you to waste your time like I did. That really took a long time to go through all that testing, and it brought me nothing pretty much. But now you know. Now the next few games we're going to look at are Twisted Metal games, so I'll go ahead and change my default input to slot 4, which is where I have those controls set up. Alright. I'll give a quick scroll down through the controls. Where you see it bold here, that's where it differs from Twisted Metal 3. We do need to talk about the advanced attacks. I forgot to mention that in Twisted Metal 3, so that's something I'll show here in a second. Now this time I'm going to use the slot 4 controller layout instead of the generic one to get through the menu. So in that case, I'll press the B button, the trigger, to move forward. Take Twister here. Right, once again, no music, but that's all right. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that this game handles way differently than Twisted Metal 3, and I guess that's part of the reason Twisted Metal 3 was unpopular when it first came out. It's a lot more like playing on a giant air hockey table or something. I'm just going to go over the differences between this game and what we've set up in Twisted Metal 3. Now, if I want to look behind me, I no longer am going to press down on the D-pad because that's brake. Circle got mapped to brake in this game. So if I want to bring up the rearview mirror, I need to hold the home button and press right on the joystick, which, you know, it's a little bit hard to see anything in there, but that's what was available in this game. I'll turn it back off. Holding the home button and pressing left gets rid of the radar up there in the upper left. Holding the home button and pressing down changes the weapons list on the bottom right there. And lastly, holding the home button... Jeez. Holding the home button and pressing up cycles through the different camera views. So that covers the differences in this game. Now, I need to talk about the advanced attacks because I forgot to mention it when we were looking at Twisted Metal 3. So if I want to shoot a freeze burst, using the joystick, I press left, right, up. You know, and then while the opponent is frozen, you should go attack. If I want to jump, I press up, up, left. And to fire the selected weapon behind me, I press left, right, down. guess that's it, huh? I don't know if I can really say much else about this game that, you know. Now, that's all I'm going to say about Twisted Metal 2. I know that, you know, this game shouldn't be glossed over, but I'm not giving a review or something. I'm just trying to get you set up so that you can play it. And this video is already way too long, so I'm going to just move on to Twisted Metal 1 next. Now, jumping into Twisted Metal here, we'll document the control setup. It's mostly the same, but once again, what is in bold here is different than Twisted Metal 3. No advanced attacks in this game either. So I'll pull the trigger to move forward. I'll pick Dark Side. What is this? Am I gonna fight myself? Now here's where I would go to options, and you'll see that I've got the controls set to standard. To go back, I press the trigger again, actually. Now I'm sure I'll get a hard time for saying this, but this game is tough, so I'm gonna go down to easy. If I want to turn on the rearview mirror in this game, I need to hold the 1 button and press right instead of the home button. I turn the radar off by holding the 1 button and pressing left. And I can change the view by holding the 1 button and pressing up. And here we see the inside of the car. Good grief, get out of here. Now on the radar over there, you see this blinking white X. That's a health module, and I need to go there right now. You know, this game is the first in the series, and it's really quite difficult in my opinion. I only ever played in God mode as a kid because I couldn't hack it, you know. I just wanted to point out that to do a tight 180, you hold down A. You hold down A with the tip of your thumb, you press plus with the heel of your thumb, and you pull the trigger all at the same time. Well, and you also turn to the side with the joystick. And that's a nice way to do a 180, even with the sluggish characters. Now that's it for the gameplay. And this game is a lot like watching an old VHS that you just found in the basement somewhere. I guess just some nice trivia to tell you about this game. When it was released, it didn't have the live action endings. Instead, it had some text that you would have to read. But then those got released later, and I put a link in the description to them because, I don't know, it's like fascinating what people used to consider finished work. Like that would have been released if the creators got their way. Like with all the Twisted Metal games, in my opinion, you can basically skip the story and you won't be missing much. These are just fun to play if you like this style of game and you want to get your fix. God. But this one is hard. Now finally, we're going to get to Twisted Metal 4. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but the video settings that I'm using for all of these is FPS limiter on, frame skip off, and I turn dithering off as well. I've been leaving the FPS counter on while I do testing, but really, you know, we could have turned it off a long time ago. Load ISO, load from USB, Twisted Metal 4, and in this case it's an image file that I use. Now the in-menu music works here, but I've probably muted it, and I also have an issue with this game where there's a flicker at the bottom of the screen, and you see that flicker there. I'm cheating, and in the recording software I've got a little block that covers that up, you know, but I'd point it out in case you have the same issue. It might just be an issue with the game. I just don't want it to be a part of the video. Now I said I would tell you if there are any exceptions to the games which use a default control layout, and this is the one. We're going to have to change the controller layout in this game so that it's compatible with the controller mapping that we're using for the whole Twisted Metal series. And I'll show you how to do that right now. I go into New Game, I'll press the trigger button, X to move forward. I'll select a tournament. And now that I'm in the car selection area, you see at the bottom it says Square is config. So to press square in this controller layout, we'll press A. And under configurations, we go all the way down to controller configuration, pull the trigger to press X. Now here's where we have to change the controller layout. Now over on the GitHub page, there's another link here at the bottom called Custom Layout in Twisted Metal 4. If we click that, then we'll see this controller layout that we want to use in Twisted Metal 4. Here it is documented in the video, and I'm going to show you how to do that in the game right now. But if you already know how to do it, then this is the goal. You can just pause it here and skip ahead. Now, in my opinion, the way this works is super counterintuitive, so I'll explain it. This blinking box at the bottom means that we're scrolling through the different options, and these are the commands that we could assign to a button on the PlayStation controller, right? And then when we select one, it's going to ask us which button do you want this function to be assigned to. So as an example, I'm going to choose just the brake. I'll pull the trigger to select it, and now it says hit a button to add. So now it expects that the next button I press is the one that I want to have brake assigned to. So I'll hit X, which is trigger on the Wiimote, and now you see, and now you see it blinking, which actually means that there are two functions assigned to that. So to clear this mess, I'll scroll up to no function, pull the trigger to hit X, and now I'll pull the trigger again to assign no function to X. Don't worry, I'm just going to tell you exactly what to do now, and if you follow along, you'll get to where you need to be. Now we're just going to work our way down the list, starting on the left side. We'll go from the top left down, and then we'll go from the top right and down. The first three entries are okay, but where it says no function for up on the D-pad, we need to change that first. Using the joystick on the nunchuck, I'll scroll up until I find gas. Okay. Pull the trigger to select it, and now I'll press up on the joystick of the nunchuck. Now it's been assigned. Okay, that one is done. Steer left and steer right are okay, but I don't want the handbrake on the down button. So now I'll press up on the joystick to scroll up until I find reverse. Okay, here's reverse. I'll pull the trigger on the Wiimote to select it, and then press down on the nunchuck joystick to assign it. God damn it. Ugh. So I'll scroll up until I find no function. Here it is. Pull the trigger, and then press down on the joystick again on the nunchuck. Now no function is assigned there. Why did it work on the... I don't understand why it worked on the other one there. Now let's scroll up until we find reverse again. Pull the trigger to select it, press down on the joystick of the nunchuck, and now it has been assigned. The left side is done. Starting on the upper right, these first three are okay, but at triangle, I want it to say turbo instead. So I scroll up using the joystick until I find turbo. Select it by pulling the trigger on the Wiimote, and then I need to press the button that would correspond to triangle, which in our case is plus. So press plus on the Wiimote, and god damn it, it happened again. Scroll up until I find no function, select that with the trigger, assign it to triangle by pressing plus. Now I've got no function assigned there. Scroll up until I find turbo, pull the trigger, press the plus button on the Wiimote, and now turbo is assigned there. Good grief. Oh. Alright, next we're going to fix what is assigned to square. It needs to be gas. So scroll up until we find gas. I'll pull the trigger. You know what? I think we can expect that this is going to assign two functions. So I'm going to go up to no function first. Select no function, press A on the Wiimote, which corresponds to square on the PlayStation controller. And now there's no function assigned there. And I'll scroll up until I find gas, pull the trigger there, and then press A on the Wiimote to assign it to that key which corresponds to square on the PlayStation controller. Okay, we're almost there. X already has no function assigned to it. I want handbrake, not normal brake, okay? Normal brake is only for slowing down. Handbrake is like, you know, for Tokyo drifting and stuff. So scroll up until we find handbrake. Where the hell is it? There. I'll pull the trigger, the B button on the Wiimote, and now I'm going to assign it to that same button. So pull the trigger again, and now we've done it. Okay, so I am so sorry that that was a big pain in the butt, and I'm sure I could have maybe done it better, but yeah, it didn't go all that well. Really, I thank you for your patience. So now that we've got this nightmare over with, we need to be careful getting out of the menu. So I want to press triangle to go back. I'm going to press plus on the Wiimote, but I'm also going to double check that I'm not actually in any command in this menu, right? So if I'm able to scroll here, that means I'm not trying to assign a function to any buttons and I'm free to back out. So if that's true, then I'll go ahead and press plus and it takes me out of this menu. So I made a mess. I'm really sorry about that. Press plus once again to go back. Now you want to save this information and it will get saved, but we need to choose a car first. So I'll pick Pizza Boy, whatever. Pull the trigger to press X. Save settings to memory card. Yes, pull the trigger again. Now that controller configuration that we just set up will have been saved by the emulator to a virtual memory card, which means we don't have to go through that process again. Next time you come into Twisted Metal 4, it'll just work. So just to show you that, I've hopped out of the emulator and I'll go ahead and jump back in now. So it froze here. Sometimes if you just go back out into the menu and then resume game, no, it really froze. If it freezes like that, you just go back out into current ISO and restart the game. No big deal. Go into tournament. But if I press A real quick, that's like pressing square. Scroll down to the controller configuration. I'll pull the trigger to hit X. And now you see our controller configuration is as it was before. So very carefully, I'll press plus to go back once again. And this time I'll pick Calypso. Now I've entered a password to skip to the oil rig here because there's something I want to demonstrate in this level. For the last time, we'll scroll down through the controls that we've got set up here. And you notice here that Twisted Metal 4's advanced attacks are a little bit different, right? A lot of them are 4-button combinations, some are even 5-button combinations. It may take a bit more practice to get them to come out in this game, but we'll cover it here shortly. Because this is the last in the Twisted Metal series that we're going to look at, and it's nearly the end of the video, I'll go ahead and review the controls once more. So to drive forward, I'll press A, and if I double tap A, then the turbo comes out. I can also turbo forward by pressing the plus button, but what's nice in this game is that double tapping has the same effect, so you don't really need to use the plus button anymore. If I want to look behind me while driving, I'll hold A with the heel of my thumb and use the tip of my thumb to hold the down button on the D-pad. Pulling the trigger executes a tight turn. This guy's really sluggish though, so it's a bit hard to see, but I am doing it. Pressing 1 pauses the game, and you can change the camera here, but you can also change the camera by pressing the home button on the Wiimote. You press C to fire weapons. I press C to cycle forward through the weapons, and if I want to cycle backwards, I'll press left on the D-pad. So just a quick review there. Now what I really wanted to cover are the advanced attacks, because in this game you do need them, and there's also a couple of situations that are a little bit glitchy, and you sometimes need to use the advanced attacks to get out. And in particular I'm talking about hyperspace here, but I'll come to that shortly. The few advanced attacks that are carried over from Twisted Metal 3 just have an extra button added, but otherwise they're the same. To shoot a freeze attack, I'll press left, right, up, up. So, but that one missed. And you see my energy bar on the right is depleted, so I'll have to wait a second. So I'll attempt to shoot a rear freeze now. Left, right, down, down. Nice, got it. Jump is the same as before, up, up, left. Rear attack is right, left, down, down. To activate the shield, you press up, up, right. Invisibility is down, down, up, up. And the last, but I think the most important one, is hyperspace. Now I use hyperspace to teleport around the level. So that'll get you out of a pinch, but even if you fall off the ledge, you can use hyperspace to save yourself, which is quite handy. So to do that, you press up, up, down, down. Hey. You press up, up, down, down. I emphasize that one because sometimes you get stuck in the environment in this game, and that's one way out. See if I can catch somebody. So that'll do it for the Twisted Metal series. Now, I hope you find these controls satisfactory. I don't have to think too much about them anymore. I'm pretty happy with the outcome, but it did take several iterations, and now you know how to change things in case you don't like it. I also hope you have a lot of fun with the emulator, and I hope you're well equipped to test different games. And you know, not every game works, and that's a pity, but you know, what we don't do is go harass the developers and ask them to work on a certain game until it's finished. That's not going to work. It's not good for the community. Just be patient, let the developers do their thing, or don't. You know, these are real people. Like, they don't always have time to go through and make sure that your game works on this emulator for the Nintendo Wii, right? Be thankful for what we've got, and hopefully your game that you like works, but it may not, and we just have to accept it. Thank you if you've watched to the end. I know that was a lot of material to cover. I hope that if you haven't played these games, you give them a shot, because I think they're a lot of fun. And if they're some of your old favorites, I hope you enjoy getting to play through them again. And I thank you for watching.